Welcome back. Now, at this stage, we are at a very interesting juncture. We have this cluster created. Now we do have the SockShop, as you saw in the last video. The SockShop application has been deployed onto the AWS cluster, EKS cluster, and we could see the 6 1 gig volumes persisted over EBS, right? So this setup is complete. At this end, you do have the EKS Anywhere cluster also set up. The CSI drivers have also been set up, right? This is not there because this is it's a migration, right? So this will not be there. I mean, we'll not manually create it. It will be created automatically when we do the migration. Now, like I said in the previous video, my PowerProtect Data Manager is already installed from a previous blog. It's up and running, so I will not reinstall it again. This particular key component, which is the Data Domain Virtual Edition, it presents a backup target for the state of the application to be captured as snapshots and persisted here, as a backup, that can be actually, presented to any downstream cluster, or now data domain is not only for Kubernetes, it can preserve any kind of backups actually, and it integrates well with PowerProtect Data Manager. The data domain as such can run as a physical appliance. It can also run it as a virtual edition in AWS or in other clouds actually. So here we will now set up this particular data domain virtual edition and then integrate it to be acting as a backup target when we actually render the storage for the backup, right, through our PowerProtect Data Manager. Okay, so how do we deploy this? This is bundled as a subscription software on AWS. Okay, so it's presented as an AMI. Okay, so I can easily spin it up and then spin it down. A typical thing like a subscription service on AWS would be. It's available through the AWS marketplace and presented as a CloudFormation template. So very easy to install and very easy to configure. It's just that configuration means a click, and sometimes it does take a little time in terms of configuring but overall it's just like a 20-minute job, right? So we'll just finish this off, and it will also present you with a view of how to deploy this in case you're trying to experiment with this demo. Okay. So what we will do is we will go to my AWS console. I am in Singapore region, okay, and I'm going to launch a stack here, okay, and let me just create a stack, and we will say that upload a template file. I already have the CloudFormation template from the AWS marketplace downloaded for DDVE. And we will say open, okay, and it will ask me a couple of questions, and I'll just let's name the stack as, let's say, DDVE. What is the instance configuration model? So it can be configured in 4 different options. You can see depending upon the volume and the nature of the beast here, in terms of how much of backup and all that actually, right? So we'll select, at least for the demo, we'll select M5X large. The number of metadata disk, I'll keep it as 1 just for demo purposes. We can increase that also. We'll just give it a name tag, DDV. This will be the instance that will be created, the DDV instance. Okay, so let me just also, we will have to create a IAM role. Actually, I have not created it. Let's do one thing as a part of this particular activity itself. We will quickly go and create an IAM role that can actually help me set up the CloudFormation template, right? Let's go to IAM, and I'm going to ease it up. Instead of just S3, I'm going to open it a little broader actually. Ideally you can ring fence it to just making sure that the right permissions are allotted and all that actually in terms of the access levels. Let's just create a role. Okay, and AWS service, we'll say EC2, because the DDV EC2 instance is going to use that IAM role to access S3. S3 is acting as a backend for the DDV instance to store the the snapshots and the file system data and all that actually, right?
Yeah.
Now I'll just say next. Okay. And the policy, I'm going to give it an admin policy, let's say that. And as I said, you don't have to be so open. Yeah, so let's pick up AWS administrator access. You should definitely ring fence to S3 only, but right now we're just going ahead with this, right? Let's name this, let's say EC2 full access. Okay, and the policy is there already, and create this role. Okay, now the role has been created, EC2 full access, and that's, let's just verify. Yeah, the role is there, right? Let me just go back to the stack here, and IAM role will be EC2 full access, right? Okay, now the key pair, I already have a key pair here that I'll use. The network configuration, my VPC is already defined. I'm going to take this particular subnet, okay? And the security group, let's say I will take this security group. Okay, so you can always customize your VPC options in terms of, where the DDB is installed. The only fact remains is that the DDB instance needs to have the right connectivity to the EKS cluster. And that's the important thing. So right now my EKS cluster and my DDB instance are in the same VPC, in the same subnet actually, right? DDB can optionally create the bucket for you, but right now I've already created the bucket in the backend. Okay, so we will name that later when the configuration of the DDB happens actually, right? Well, actually I've not created the bucket. I'll create it when the configuration of the DDB is being done actually. Now here you see that I've already preset the IP address to 172.24.165.50. This is the private IP that the DDB instance will use actually, to communicate with the host actually. So let's just go ahead. Let me just verify if I have entered everything correctly. Okay. Good. Let's go ahead and click on next. Okay. So it's a simple CloudFormation template. The moment the template is deployed, the create is in progress. And as a part of that, basically, what will happen is the EC2 instance that will, host the DDB software will start spinning up actually, right? So let it take its time. Meanwhile, what we will do is we'll create the backend S3 bucket that we will use for the DDVE. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to S3 as a service. Make sure that the bucket is in the same region where the instance is being launched, and I will create a bucket. Let's say my DDVE bucket. Okay, and I'll just give it a suffix. Let's say that ANH. Okay, just to make sure. The region is there, Singapore.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's create the bucket. Okay, so the bucket has been created. It's called as my DDBE bucket, ANH. And let's refresh this view so that I can see. Okay, the CloudFormation should be still, trying to actually build the, the instance or deploy the instance. We'll come back when that process, the CloudFormation template is fully deployed, right? Let me pause this video. Okay, so the DDB instance, I think it's up and running. I'm going to grab, see, ideally what we need to do is now at this stage, we have deployed the CloudFormation template for DDBE. It's running as an instance. The bucket for the backend for DDBE is also created actually. Now, Ideally, in an ideal production setup, you would not expose DDBE instance as a public-facing IP address, from a console standpoint. But for the sake of demo, I've just exposed it. Otherwise, you will have a RDP host, and then you can use it as a jump server, and then you can access the DDBE console. Here, I'm gonna just expose the DDBE instance through a public IP address. This is just for the console, not for the actual DDBE connection to Power Protect Data Manager and all that, right? That still happens over the private IP and all that. Now, let me take this and just browse this IP address, and we will go ahead and accept the certificate. You can see that this is the management console for the DD System Manager, right? The default username that starts the operation with the sysadmin, and the default password that will be there, the first time password, is going to be the instance ID that actually got created as a part of the CloudFormation. So you can see that the DDBE instance has an instance ID here. Yeah. So I'm going to take this instance ID and I'm going to put it here. So this will be your first starting point. Obviously, you will be required to change your password when you first log in into the DD System Manager, right? Now, while this comes up, yeah, okay, so this is the current password, the default one, and I'm going to set a new password that hopefully I will remember and I will not forget. Okay, so now what will happen is basically we have to do you could see the simplistic action of just rendering a CloudFormation template. If you have the VPC and everything defined, it's just launch the instance, access the console, and then start the configuring the device, right? So I'm just going to accept this license agreement, and then a series of GUI tasks occur. Do you want to configure the licenses? I'll say yes. Okay. And then I'll say yes. And then it asks me, do you want to configure the network? I'll say yes in this case. So it's already taken the default, DNS name to the instance and all that. I'll just manually configure this as a host name, which is backed by my DNS name, right? DNS domain actually. So DDVE-AWS.com. I'm going to access this particular device through this particular host name, DDVE-AWS.com. And the domain name is thecloudgarage.com. This particular host name, DDVE-thecloudgarage.com, is already mapped in my DNS servers by 172.24.165.50, which is the private IP address of the the DDBE instance actually. So let me just go ahead and say next. Okay, this is the interface. DHCP is fine. Okay, so we have to submit this. So once this happens, we will go to now for the general settings. Okay, it asked me, do you want to configure the file system? I'll say yes. Okay, so you can see that the file system in the backend will be rendered through an object store. Yeah, which in this case will be, I'm going to give okay, this is a good thing. When DDB stores the on the file system in the S3 bucket, it is basically encrypting it actually. So it's not stored as a plain. So I'm going to give a passphrase that will help create the encryption when objects are stored on the. So this is client-side encryption on the S3 bucket that we will apply when the objects will be created in S3 in the backend, right? And I think what I've given is my DDBE bucket ANH, right? This was the bucket that we created as a part of the S3 bucket creation, right? And I'm going to say next. And when I do this, this will take at least 3 to 5 minutes once the file. Okay, so I'll come to that when. So the metadata will be added to the file system. Next. And you make sure that enable file system after creation is clicked. This will take 3 to 5 minutes, the file system creation. And I'm going to pause and come back to the video once this is done. So we can see that the tasks are completed. The file system has been created and enabled here. Okay, and I'll progress. Now it says you want to configure the system settings. I'll say yes. If I want to change the password, I'll keep the same password that I resetted. So I'll omit this or skip this particular step. Right now I don't have an email integration, so I'm just going to skip this particular part. Okay, and submit. Now I will say okay. Now data domain primarily supports 3 protocols: data domain boost protocol, which is a proprietary protocol in terms of optimizing the amount of data processed or stored and captured for snapshots and all that. It really helps reduce a lot of different things, especially when you are running things on public cloud, in terms of data egress charges, the storage charges, which is actually required to store the snapshots and everything. Other than that, CIFS is supported and NFS is also supported, right? So I'm going to say yes to configuring DD Boost protocol. And ideally, I would have created a new local user for this new storage unit. Storage unit is a logical entity where we will actually target the snapshots. But here I will use sysadmin. I know it's not the recommended practice here, but let's go ahead with this one. And I'm going to say next and submit. Okay. Once this is done, I will say okay. CIFS, I will say no right now. And just a second.
No NFS. Okay.
File system is not available. Okay, no problem. Okay, so now we have the DD Boost and everything done here. Let me see if NFS is enabled or not, because we'll need NFS for discovering the RPC. Through RPC process, I will discover the ports for. Okay, so NFS is currently active and running. Okay, let me see the port that I need for the NFS connectivity. So 2049, 2052 is the mount port, and yeah, this should be it actually. Okay. So yeah, we are done with this configuring the data domain. Okay.
Yeah.
And now what we will do is I will go to DD Boost and I will add the interface on which DD Boost can work. So you can see that I'm on DD Boost. This is the protocol, and then I'm in IP network for that. I click on the interface groups. I click on this. You can see that this is the private interface for my data domain virtual edition. And I've told you we mapped the ddve.cloudgarage.com to this IP address. It's a private IP address. I will add in this interface and we are done. Okay. So now that we are done with this particular task and the data domain virtual edition is set up, we will now integrate DDVE. Okay. We'll come back to this slide here. DDVE is done. Now we will integrate these two entities, right? Okay, so let's go to PPDM console, and from there I will actually try to establish connectivity with this and discover and integrate with this actually. Okay. Yeah. Let me pause the video while I open the console. So you can see that I am on. While sometimes people do ask me, why don't you have a single system, right? So it's like, as a part of the data domain data protection suite of solutions, we have various products and they all function or deliver certain functionality, and they are all integrated in the sense that they are well tested, validated and all that. So right now data domain virtual edition is one component. The Power Protect Data Manager, actually, which also integrates with variety of different components, is the go-to console when we want to orchestrate the whole backup and restore process, right? So I'm right now logged in into my Power Protect Data Manager. This is running on premises. The data domain virtual edition is running in AWS, right? Just to be clear enough there, I'm gonna log in here. Okay. So this is how it looks like, if you haven't come across the console. But I'm going to go and go to infrastructure, and I'm going to go to storage. Okay. You can see I already have a on-premises data domain, which is actually working. Okay. I can use either an on-premise data domain as a target, or I can use something in the cloud, like how we have configured DDVE in AWS, right? So right now I'm going to add a storage unit, okay?
Yeah.
And the host name for this, I'm going to keep the name as simple as DDVE-AWS, and the IP address FQDN is DDVE, thecloudgarage.com, right? And that maps to 172.24.165.50, which is routable through my internet network to AWS. So port number is 3009. This port you can't reconfigure. This is a default port and remains unchanged. Host credentials, we will have to, so I've already created a host credential here. Okay, sysadmin. Actually, I will create another set of credentials so that you understand. AWS DDVE, okay? And the username will be sysadmin. And I have changed the password to something else. So I'm going to put that password here. Okay. Okay. I'm going to save this. Okay. And with that, so we have the host name, the port, the credentials that we just created. Let's verify if the connectivity is there or not. You can see that I'm able to reach this particular IP, and through this host name, the certificate is valid, and I'll say accept. And once the certificate is accepted and verified, I will just save. And that's how I now have a connectivity established from PPDM to data domain, which is in the cloud, right? So it's a simple affair in that sense. Now, while this happens, I can also now start to actually, you will see in the backend when the first time, setup happens, a job would have been triggered in the backend as a system job to discover, this particular storage unit. Or the data domain and the associated storage units which were created. So we created one data boost, DD boost storage unit actually, right? In the console of data domain. You can see that the initial discovery is on for DDVE AWS, and now that it's complete. So it's a very quick scan through what's the configuration of DDVE, and now that this, so you have to understand. PPDM is the orchestrator, and the underlying storage on which these snapshots are being kept, right, and stored are on this particular host, right? Or I can use on-prem or in cloud. So we'll target this particular DDBE as our storage provider for backups and everything. Now that this is done, let's just quickly see if I can see the storage unit that was created there. So I can go here. I can say manage storage unit, and you can see that the storage unit has been created, right? This is what we created there. So this brings us to a logical conclusion of creating data domain virtual edition on AWS and then integrating it with PPDM so that any backup policies or assets that we discover and backup we will target this particular underlying storage. Just to quickly summarize, I know that this is getting now a lot of components you are seeing in the demo through a series of videos. Just to make sure that you understand what's happening here, we are very close to what our final objective is. We have the EKS cluster with CSI, EBS. We have the SockShop implementation done in the sock shop, we have already created a demo user and we have placed an order. The order ID, I think it's 65560D, something I forgot, but
That's right.
We'll remember that.
Yeah.
So we do have that. We have the EKS cluster created. We have the CSI driver deployed. We now have the DDVE instance created. We have the integration done through. Now, before I can actually create backup and then restore and migrate this backup, to here, what we'll have to do is we have to discover this cluster and this cluster in PPDM. So now my PPDM needs to know which are my clusters, right? Because it has to start talking to these clusters. How to do that is what we will see in the next video. Here we will now apply those. As I said earlier, we omitted a step, right? For creating the service account for PPDM on the clusters and the required RBAC policies, right? The next step will be around that, actually. So I'll see you in the next video.
All right.
Cheers.